Okay, great. So let's go. So here's my talk title. You don't need module federation, but let's first of all start with who I am. So who I am. My name is Nikita Poltoratsky. I'm working at a company called Akveo, where I'm doing lots of JavaScript, lots of Angular, lots of some system stuff, some manager stuff, and so on. So I'm more like a developer person and advocate. And here is my Twitter handle, and I would say it's more like my social handle. You can find me with this handle at Twitter, at Medium, at Dev2, almost everywhere. So don't hesitate, follow me on Twitter, and I'll help you with everything you want related to web technologies. And finally, here's how to make .software. Here's my website. It's my blog platform. So I'm publishing my posts there. I'm publishing some different cool tools there, my videos and so forth. So go to howtomake.software and subscribe to my newsletter. So what are we gonna talk about? First of all, we'll start with the module federation, with what is it? Because I bet not all of you know what is it. In spite of all my newsletters and all the news systems were spammed by the module federation content maybe last 6 months. So I think some of you have no idea what is it. Some of you know heard about it, but don't know how it works. And I will try to make us on the same page to allow us speak about it, problems about it, features, and so forth. So then I'll show you a demo, and we will discuss the features of the module federation, cool ideas it allows us to implement, and finally, what's the main point of this talk? We'll talk about the problems, about the trade-offs it will bring to our projects. Okay, let's start with the first point. Here is the module federations. Here is not equality, it's kind of my associations just to make you understand my ideas better. So I would say that module federation is like about microservices for the front end. Module federation is a Webpack plugin that allows you to split your application into multiple different modules and compile and deploy them completely separately, and then bundle them into the single application right in the browser. Okay, so it allows you to split your application to multiple different chunks that do not related to each other, and they will be gathered into the single application right in the browser, not during the build time. Okay, it's a runtime. That's the main idea. So let's take a look. How does it work a bit? So right now, if we need to make some part of our application to log dynamically, we are using a Webpack, and we are just typing import braces, and okay, so here we want to import a dialog component, and the Webpack will understand that we need to bundle this dialog component into a separate chunk and then load it dynamically when it will be requested. So here's the first question, like before, we place this current near our current file, this dialog component, to allow Webpack to find it and to build it into the separate bundle. In case if we have no dialog component near our current file, Webpack will throw an error and you'll not be able to bundle your application. But right now you can do so. So it's an after section. Now you can type like import braces and dialog component. And right now, if you're using module federation plugin, you do not need to place this dialog component near your current file. It can be placed somewhere. It can be placed, hosted somewhere on across the web. I have no idea where, at some different services. So it can live anywhere, not in your project, not in your repository. It can be built by any other company or by any other team or by any other developer and hosted everywhere. It doesn't need to live in your project. So let me show you how does it look like. Here's an example of the module federation plugin from the demo. I'll show you in a few minutes. So how does it look? It's just part of the Webpack configuration I have written. So what's going on here? We're adding a module federation plugin into our Webpack build configuration. Great. And we are telling that this current application name will be design system. That means that if will be imported in other applications under this name. Okay, and file name remote entry means that we'll build our remote entry from our current application to this specific file, and then another application will be able to load our application exposed modules through this remote entry file. Okay, then we are adding that some content that will be exposed from our application. So when I will build this application, I will expose dialog components from it. And then when another application will load this file dynamically, he'll be able to use this dialog component the same way as it was, as I showed you in the previous slides when we imported it dynamically. Okay, here's the way how we can add remotes that will be used in our current application. So when we need to say that I just want to load another remote application or another remote module federation application, I will configure it as a remote. And finally, module federation plugin allows us to share some dependencies. For instance, we can share a React dependency. In that way, if both my application, one that exposes module and one that consumes its module, will require exactly similar React with exactly similar version, then module federation will not load it 2 times, it will load it only 1 time and reuse this shared dependency. Great. It was just a small example. One more association, just for understanding, is that module federation it's like an NPM in the browser from my point of view. Okay, so it allows you to say that your application requires some different modules. Like in NPM, it's not modules. In module federation, it's like module federation modules, and then bundle them in the browser. So it's like a new idea of the package management. So you can, lots of people across the globe can bundle their parts in small module federation modules, and then you can reuse it in your application easily. So it's kind of a package manager for the browser. Again, it's not an equality, just an association, just to make you understand it easily. Okay, and finally, a bit of terminology to speak about it. So what is module federation? I already told you, it's an Webpack plugin that allows you to compile your application in such a way that some exposed parts from this application can be consumed by another application across the web. Okay, here is the next term is host. Host is an application that will load federated plugins from other application. Remote is an application that provides those plugins for another application, such as host application, which will load remotes. So first of all, we are running host application in the user's browser, and then this host application will load some remote parts inside it. And finally, here's a bidirectional host. It's the thing that I showed you before, like Webpack configuration, because that's a thing that exposes some modules, and at the same time, it can consume some modules. So it does like two-way. So it's a bidirectional host, okay? So finally, let me show you a demo on how does it work. So where is it? Okay. So here I have let's start with a code base here. So here I have 2 applications, both of them written using React, just because it's simpler than Angular and easier to show. So what's going on here? Here I have 2 applications, app 1 and app 2. App 1 is hosted as a localhost 3001, and app 2 is hosted as a localhost 3002. So here I have an index file that's low as a bootstrap file that just renders app here. Okay, and app renders a red title, and what's the most important here, just imports a blue title from the app 2. Okay, so it renders just 2 titles, just 2 pieces of text. And here, it loads this title from the blue title, app 2 blue title. Since app 2, if we can look here, SRC have a blue title here. It's just a blue title component. And the same thing as the app component, it renders its own blue title and dynamically imports red title from the app one and renders it. Okay. Also, here I can show a Webpack configuration. What's most important here is module federation. So it's a Webpack configuration for the app1. Its name is app1. It configures file name, and what's most important, remotes. Okay, so it says that app2 requires these remote entry files that will be downloaded from the localhost 3002. And since we have configured remotes like app2, because of that, we can go to the app file and write that we are importing something from the app2 and type some dependencies that is exposed from the app2. And if I go to the Webpack configuration from the app2, you will see that app2 exposes blue title. Okay, so I bet you got a point here. So let me show you how does it work. So here is a localhost 3001. So we are loading the first application that renders just a red title and then renders blue title. But blue title here is loaded dynamically at the runtime from another application that is hosted on the localhost 3002. So let's take a look here. Here is the remote entry that's loaded from the localhost 3002. And then we are loading src blue title.js. So it's a file that's loaded dynamically. That is file that contains blue title components that's exposed from the localhost 3002. If I go here at the preview, I'll make it a bit smaller, we'll be able to find it. Okay, so okay, it's React import. So for instance, here are styles that are rendered for the blue title components. It's like create element h1 with the styles color blue and blue title. If we go here, we have the same styles here and a blue title here. This is just a React component that was loaded dynamically from another host. Okay, and let me close it. If I go to the localhost 3002 to load blue title first because it's its own component, and now red title are loaded dynamically. And if we take a look here, exactly we have the same file, but now it's red title.js, and it contains content that corresponds to the red title React component that it lives in the app1. So color red and red title is written here. And we can go here, find a red title, and yeah, here it is. This is just a React component loaded dynamically. And what's the most important, it's not only loaded dynamically, it's completely bundled dynamically. So these two applications, application 1 and application 2, are bundled dynamically. They have no idea about each other. But then in the browser, my application tries to download the remote entry file that specifies my Webpack configuration, and if it exists, then I can consume some components that are exposed from it. Okay, great. So I think we ought to move on to the next point, that is features. I bet you already got the idea of the module federation. So what features it brings to us? First of all, it's independent deployments, that I think one of the most important features that it brings to us, because it allows us to split our application into multiple different modules and deploy them separately. That means that if I'm changing the only small part of the app, I do not need to recompile and redeploy the whole application. I can recompile and redeploy only the small part of this app. Okay, it's great. And it will be updated, and in the runtime, when the next user will open the page, he'll download a new version of the JavaScript, and he will get this change. So we don't need to redeploy all the app each time. The next idea I see here is kind of a plugin architecture. Since we can load independent modules in the browser, in the runtime, we can do plugin architecture easily. So we can implement it in a very cool way, and I'll show you a bit later what am I talking about. The next point is dependency sharing, and so that's the point that I showed you. So if I have, for instance, 10 different module federation applications, and they consume lots of models from each other, and all of them are compiled and deployed separately. But if they require the same version of the React, then we'll have no problems, because module federation plugin will take care about it, and it will reuse this React dependency for us. Okay. And the final code is that it's a framework agnostic solution. I just inserted it here just to highlight it, because since module federation is built on the lower levels and frameworks, okay, it's built on the level of build tools, since it's a Webpack plugin, then we can say that it is a framework agnostic solution. In fact, if we want, we can use multiple frameworks on the same page, because module federation allows us to export and consume different JavaScript, whatever you want. So thinking about it, we can say that we can run multiple different frameworks on the same page. Sounds great, I think. Okay, the next point is ideas. So here's a few ideas on how you can use your module federation in your projects. For instance, our green design systems. I think that's your dream. That was my dream, because since in my company we are doing lots of different applications that are bound to the same design system, and if design system changes, we need to rebuild and redeploy all the applications that are related to this design system. But if we are using the module federation to build and compile design system, and we are using module federation for our applications to allow them to consume design system as a federated plugin, in that case, we do not need to redeploy and rebuild our application if something's changed in the design system. I would say we can just recompile our design system, redeploy it, and boom, everyone is getting the new version of the design system, and all the applications works, and all the colors, all the buttons, and I don't know, imagine other cases, works the same in all the applications. So I think that's cool. The next point is, for instance, app shell. That works great when we are talking about some kind of enterprise, like big applications. That's a pretty common pattern when they have a shell applications, for instance, with a menu and maybe a few different modules, buttons, I don't know. And then inside, each menu point redirects you to the separate dashboard, where each dashboard is a very huge application that can be built, for instance, by separate teams and so on. And if you have multiple teams are working on that project, you need to find a way on how to deal with the complexity when you have a standalone applications and multiple teams are contributing inside, and you need to work with it somehow. And module federation can help us here while splitting our application onto multiple different applications that are bundled and deployed separately. Okay, so all our dashboards can be built and deployed as a separate applications, and they even can be accessed as a separate applications. But if we need to insert them inside the shell, we can just load them, as I showed you in the my React example. We can do the same with not only with the button components or title components or dialog components. We can do that with an app component. So we can just load dynamically part of that application, just this dashboard, and show it in the shell. So I bet that's pretty simple, but it's pretty powerful solution. Another case, it's pretty similar to the previous one, but I just want to mention it, is in multi-shell. It's a pretty common situation. So I saw it multiple times. When you have different modules in your application, you are selling products, and you need to sell different modules to different customers. In that case, you can do that really simple with a module federation, since you can bundle them separately and just include some specific parts in the shells. So it will be lots easier with module federation. So everything that I showed you before, I hope that looks great for you, because it looks great for me. And I would say, yeah, it is. It's great until it's not as great as I see. And what is the problem? So all this stuff with the module federation and all this hybrid, it's really reminds me of the way when people invented microservices. It was, as I remember, 15 years ago, and then people started to use microservices everywhere, and then people understand that there are lots of problems with the microservices. They need to somehow deal with the infrastructure problems, somehow deal with very big number of problems that microservices bring to our projects. And now people learned, people have knowledge, and people understand how to use microservices and when to use microservices. And since Module Federation introduced pretty similar ideas from my point of view, I decided to try to procrastinate on the problems it may bring into our projects. And then now I have a list of different problems that I think you will have in your projects if you start using Module Federation without a real need for that. Yeah, okay, so let's go on. The first problem, of course, is versioning. I think it's one of the most popular problems with the software when you have multiple different parts of the software. Okay, so if your system consists of multiple different subsystems, then you will definitely have some problems with versioning, I think. What's going on here? If you are doing multiple modules in your front-end application, and somehow API of some module will change, what's going on? You'll just break the applications that use this model. And when we are doing that in the build time, like including NPM packages in our builds, and so forth, we will catch that error at the build time, and I hope it will not go to the production, people will not see it. But if we are talking about the module federation, we can just change the API of our design system, for instance. Yep, remember that example when I told you that, for instance, we have a design system and multiple apps that consume it. So in that case, if we change the API in the design system, for instance, it will start opening dialogues with another method name, and all the applications will be broken, and we will not notice it. Only our users will notice it. So it will be a problem, I bet, or a big problem. And here I have a few ideas on how to deal with it. For instance, we can start versioning of our APIs. Yeah, it sounds like a cool idea, because if we can add a version to our API, in that case, we can control on when our clients, so when the clients of our model will consume our APIs. So if we are changing the API of the dialog, then we are publishing it to another URL. And all the applications that are consuming our design system, they will still consume it from the V1. But when they will decide to migrate to the new API, they will do the migration and change the API, change the URL from which it downloads our module with the design system. Pretty easy, but in that case, we can't allow our system to update dynamically, because if I'm changing the color of the button, for instance, for the primary button, for instance, yep, we will still have to redeploy all the applications that depends on this model, because they will have to change the version of the APIs they're consuming. In that case, I think we can publish all the minor changes and all the patch changes to the same version of the API. And when something like interesting changes, and if we are breaking something, in that case, we are publishing new version. So it's kind of a semi-versioning. And the same thing about a date version. I saw that multiple projects, and I think that works great. So I would say if you are not using any great versioning technique, will be like this guy who is publishing the production and then trying to leverage all the problems it brought to you. So I would say we can continuously deploy minor and patch versions to our current deploy. Okay, so if we deploy the version 1, we can continuously add minor and patch versions to it, and every client will be updated, and everything will work great. And then when we need to break something, we'll deploy a new major version with a new URL. Okay, so that's great, but as you can see, it's introduced a few more complexities in our system. So we need to control versions, we need to keep two APIs, because when we are deployed a new version, we need to wait until all the clients of our module will change that version. So we can't just stop the previous version. We need to change until all the clients will change the version. Okay, that was the first point. The second point is performance. Of course, it's performance. So that's an idea to show you how will work your client's browsers when you'll start using module federation, I think. Just because module federation is not introducing any performance problems by itself, but it makes simpler for you as a developer to introduce more performant problems. So I would say, yeah, module federation introduce a bit more of JavaScript, but it's just a few kilobytes, so it doesn't matter. But when you are using module federation, you can easily introduce lots of different libraries and frameworks into your project. Okay, so if you're using an Angular, for instance, in your app, and then you say, oh, okay, I can write a separate module. Maybe we'll write it in React, or maybe in Vue, or maybe in Svelte, or whatever framework. And finally, in a few years, you will have multiple frameworks in the front end, and that will be all full. So I would say that module federation doesn't introduce any performance problems by itself, but it allows you to break your performance simpler, lots simpler than it was before. Okay, communication. That's the next pretty important point, I think. So, what's the problem with the communication? The communication is the main problem with the tight coupling. I think since we can download JavaScript dynamically, download federated modules from other hosts, we will start coupling them. So I bet we will have cases when two modules are importing each other, are using services from each other or whatever, and we'll start live as a single module, and it will be impossible to use them separately because it will crash. So I would say the best idea here is to never communicate with federated modules directly and use kind of an event bus. I hope you know this pattern when all the modules of the system will not communicate with each other directly, so we'll have no idea about other modules. They will just subscribe to the event bus. That's will be shared thing. Yep. So they will subscribe to it and listen for particular events, and they will publish their events to this event bus. Okay, but they will not communicate to each other directly, never. Okay, let's move on. The next part is state management. This might be not very obvious, but I'll try to explain it. So the problem with the state management is exactly the same as we have the problem with different databases from microservices architecture. There is a very like a rule of thumb for the microservices that each microservice has to have its separate database, and all the changes to this database can be made via this microservice. The problem is if another services are starting to write in this database directly, then we have kind of not obvious communications with these microservices. So some data appears in this database, but we have no idea why, because our service doesn't write inside. So the same thing with the state management. So I think if we are using module federation and loading different parts of our application dynamically, each of these parts has to have its separate state management, and it has to consume data through its APIs. They shouldn't have any shared state manager, because in that case, one additional module can break all your system just because you will load it and it will change some data inside, and you will have no idea why, because it has no API to change this data. It will change it by itself, so it's pretty weird. Those bugs will be almost impossible to catch. So the best practice is to add a separate state manager to each dynamically loaded plugin in your app and communicate only through their APIs and no other way to do so. Okay. The next point is testing. And with testing, we have problems again. You might notice that now we just split all the parts of the application into multiple federated modules. So they're compiled and deployed dynamically and separately, and then bundled in the browser. So you can conclude that it's easier to test because you do not need to run the whole application to test some parts of it. So it might be faster. Yeah, it might be faster, but I can claim that it will be more complex just because if you start writing integration testing, because if you need to do integration testing, you will have to somehow up multiple different hosts with different modules and coordinate with them, and testing will be just harder, because before, when we had to write an integration testing, we just ran our application and ran our tests and it works. And now we'll have to run different applications, combine them somehow, and run some specific tests. So I just claim that it will be really harder. And what's the bad news here? I have no idea how to deal with that simple. Because, yep, we can write some scripts, we can invent complex solutions for that. Of course, we can solve the problem, but it will be harder than it was before, and that's my point. Great. The next point is security. I would say that's very fast about that. So module federation, as I told you, is like an NPM in the browser. So it loads some scripts from other domains. And if we are doing kind of a pluggable architecture, we can allow users, for instance, users to insert the URLs in our applications, and our system will download this code and run these plugins. But in that case, we can download some malware or something like that. So I have a few concerns about the security with the module federation, but I don't tell you that it has real problems with the security. I would say if you trust NPM, then you have to trust module federation, because in general, you will not have any security problems. It might be in some specific cases you will, but not in general. So don't hesitate about that. And the next thing, and as I remember, the final is a documentation. The problem is when we are creating a monolith application, we have all the code right here in one app, in one IDE, in one project, in one Git repository, and we can easily click to the method signature and take a look on how this works. And if we are splitting our application into multiple different parts, it will be really harder to find out how does it work, how all the modules connected to each other, and so on. So you'll have to write more documentation, and this documentation will have to be more detailed. Okay, so it's a problem, I think. So we'll need more documentation. Okay, so I just explained to you a few problems I see that module federation will bring to us, and we need to make kind of a conclusion. So you might ask, so you don't need module federation, right? I don't think so. I think that module federation is a great tool. It's really a game changer for us, but I would say it's not for all of us, because module federation introduced tons of trade-offs like version, performance, overall complexity of the system, communication, state management, testing, monitoring, documentation, and others. And we'll have to waste lots of time to deal with these trade-offs. Okay, so I would say that for now, it would be better, I think, not to use module federation in our projects and wait a few time, maybe a few months or years, when the community develops the solutions for these problems and for these trade-offs. I mean, great solutions that will allow us to leverage on maybe most of these trade-offs easily. Okay, and wait for the times when module federation will be simple to use, and we'll introduce only a few trade-offs for our applications. Okay, that's almost all that I wanted to talk to you. So again, who am I? My name is Nick, and here's my Twitter handle. Don't hesitate to follow me. Find me at howtomake.software, have a newsletter, so join. Here's a few resources if you want to learn about module federation more deeply. I bet we will share this presentation. You'll be able to find these resources and learn through them. There's really great resources. And frankly speaking, that's it. So I'm waiting for questions.
Thanks a lot, Nikita, for the talk. It's nice and interesting once again. And we do have some questions. And the first question is from the audience, from Kos. How the model federation is different from script type equal to module?
Okay. Script type equals module. As I remember, script type equals module is a HTML standard that allows us to download like modules, JavaScript modules inside the browser. It's a completely different thing because module federation is a Webpack plugin that allows you to build your application in such a way that some parts of the application can be consumed by other applications in the runtime. So I would say they're completely different things. I have no idea how to compare them.
Okay, so, cool. One more question from my side.
Okay.
So while I was listening to that, I started to think about some use cases. So is this module federation stuff is more suitable when you want to integrate the whole small application to another one, or you can also use it to distribute just some independent components?
That's a good question. I would say as an idea of that module federation, of the idea of it, Webpack plugin is to allow us to split our applications into multiple different parts and compile and deploy them separately. And I think that will work for all the use cases. Okay, and for integration, the whole small app inside your apps, and for component sharing system, for instance, as I showed an example during the talk, that I think that's a great idea to build your design system or your components library as a module federation plugin, and then distribute it everywhere, so everyone across the web will be able to consume it, and everyone will be able to get instant updates. So I think it will be suitable for all the types of the applications and use cases. But again, as a topic of my talk, it's introduced lots of trade-offs, and some of use cases will just will not win, never win.
Yeah, so just to make it completely sure. So for example, imagine we're building some design system with buttons and other really small components. So it's expected that when you will integrate it, you will need to pass some input arguments in it, right? So it's also supportable because it's a pure JavaScript.
Yep.
But so you will not be able to use the TypeScript typings and features.
I would say no, just because you are using TypeScript at the build time. But module federation will allow you to download some stuff at the runtime. So at the runtime, we have no TypeScript at all.
Yeah.
I think in that case, you will have to distribute, for instance, types for your library somehow separately, and maybe in that case, you will use it during the development, and then in the right time, you'll have to just download the required module and run it. So something like that.
I see. Cool. Thank you. One more question from Lars regarding to the first one. So is module federation solving a problem Webpack created in the first place? So a topical one.
Right, great. In the first place, what problem are we talking about?
Yeah, Lars, maybe you can join us with this question.
Oh, as you can see, oh yeah, Lars, you're here. Could you please elaborate on your question?
Yeah, it's in the next comment. and I think I'm coming from the same place as Kos, who was asking, because it seems that ES modules and content sharing policies and all that would be able to do most of this natively. It's just the bundling that made this difficult in the first place to refer to common modules and so on.
I would say yep, but I didn't use this combination of the ES modules and CSP the right time. So frankly speaking, I have no idea how does it work and how will it behave in the real projects. But I would say that Webpack will be better, I think, just because it's already created, tested, and well-working solutions that's intended to load all the stuff directly in the browser without any need to rewrite and reconfigure your code. You just need to reconfigure the way you bundle your application. Also, regarding your question and ES modules and CSP, what about shared dependencies? How will it behave if we can? Will it resolve all the required dependencies for us, or will we have to do that by ourselves? So I think right now the module federation is the most fulfilling solution for that problem. So it tries to fill all the gaps. I think that will be the answer. Okay, so except that you do have to recompile the TSC into JavaScript components and native standard approach. Okay. And
yeah, it's just a comment. I don't think
we
need to elaborate on that. So let me push just the last one, okay? And we'll continue. Yeah, the last one, I was also interested about the deployment. So you was talking a lot about that. It's available everywhere and stuff. And but is there any free host like an NPM for the libraries to support that?
I would say no. So it's more like an idea to distribute your design system and component library through the module federation. It's module federation is for more like distributing libraries through the module federation is just one of the things you can do. And I don't think that something like that already exists, but it's a good idea to build something like that.
Yeah, because
good idea for my next project.
That would be something also very well known. And we have one more question from the audience.
Pardon me. Regarding the previous question, I just want to add a bit regarding the previous question. So, for instance, you're doing open website that everybody can use it, and you can configure it such way to expose all the UI components from it. So everyone across the web will be able to use components from your website in their websites, and it will work that way. So that's a great thing to share.
I see. So you will need to maintain it anyway, and also expose it. Okay, that's cool. And promise the last one. Is there any problems with the older browsers?
Any problems with the older browsers? Well, frankly speaking, I have no idea. I didn't try to run it into old IE, but I would say that maybe it will have, since even Angular just dropped the support of IE 10, as I remember. So I don't think it will work, but it might be. We need to test it, okay? So I have no answer for this question.
Okay, we're done with questions, and thanks a lot, Nikita. It was great and interesting topic. A little bit hollywar, which is really cool for our meetup. So
yeah, sure. Write in the comments if you have opposite mind.
Yeah, it would be great if you will post the link to your presentation with all the links for information just to YouTube chat, so that everybody will have it. Okay, and we can say thank you to you once again, and can continue.